Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Amplify Horse Racing Hangouts. I can't believe that it's July already. The summer is certainly flying by, and especially now that things are starting to open up a bit and we're able to get out and about, it seems like the time is just zooming. So here we are again for another episode of the Amplify Horse Racing Hangouts. Tonight we're going to dive into safety and integrity, which is a super broad topic, as I'm going to mention in a little bit as I give you more of an overview of what the episode for tonight is going to entail. My name is Anise Montpleasure. I'm your host, as always. I'm the co-founder and president of Amplify Horse Racing, and also the equine education coordinator for the Kentucky Equine Education Project. So just a couple quick announcements, or I guess one big announcement is I would love to see as many of you as possible in Saratoga. If you're going to be in Saratoga Springs during the race meet, definitely reach out over Amplify social media. Let me know, if there are any educational questions, topics that you'd like to know about while we're there, things that you would like to experience either at the track or learning more about at the sales. I want to be there as a resource for all of you. Our mission is education, careers. If you want to talk about any of that, do reach out. We'll find a time to connect at the track at some point. And with that, on August 11th through the 15th, we are going to be hosting Amplify Educational Saratoga Tours. So be watching for that within the next couple weeks. We're going to be pushing out some promotional graphics and some registration information across our social media channels. So get ready for that. I'm excited to see you guys. I'm so excited to be out and about. Today for Keep, we were hosting, I got to see a little bit different kind of racing. I was at the Red Mile for a Harness Horse Youth Foundation event to learn more about standardbreds and harness racing. So getting to learn it all, you really never stop learning, which is so exciting. So with that, I want to segue into our topic for tonight. As you guys all know, if you've been tuning into this series of the Horse Racing Hangouts, this is season 2, and we're really diving into back to the basics. So we're still focusing on careers in the thoroughbred industry, but diving into a lot of the more logistics and some of the key pieces of knowledge that you need to learn and understand if you are new to this industry and you're just starting to get involved. We want to make sure that you have an understanding of, some of these big topics that are going on. And a big thing that is always ongoing in the thoroughbred industry and in racing in general is safety and integrity. Are the human athletes safe? Are the equine athletes safe? And are we doing things with the greatest transparency possible? This is a topic that is, 10 miles wide. We could spend a lot of time really getting into the nitty-gritty of what goes into safety and integrity and what we are doing to keep our thoroughbred and human athletes safe. But a big topic as of late is the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, which was signed into law in 2020. And so I want to give you guys a little bit of an overview of what that is and how that is going to impact the thoroughbred industry. So HISA or HISA or HISA, a lot of people have a lot of different ways of saying the acronym, is meant to bring uniform national standards and regulation to thoroughbred racing related to anti-doping, medication control, and racetrack safety. And this is all meant to increase safety, transparency, and efficiency to all state racing jurisdictions. So how are things currently done? So there's a group called the ARCI, or the Association of Racing Commissioners International, and they have laid out essentially model rules for racing. However, each individual racing jurisdiction and its racing commission can determine how they want to adopt and implement these rules. So even though there are these model rules of racing, every single state that has thoroughbred racing is going to have its very own racing commission, and then they will determine what rules they are adopting and implementing and how regulation looks for them. So when HISA comes into place, all racing jurisdictions will abide by a uniform set of rules and regulations in relation to that anti-doping, medication testing, and racetrack safety. So who is going to be in control of all of that? So that is where the authority comes into place, the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. And so this is going to be an independent authority that will essentially be at the helm. It will have a 9-person board of directors, and then it has 2 standing committees. And those standing committees are the Anti-Doping and Medication Control Standing Committee, so that is one. And then there's the Racetrack Safety Standing Committee. So any recommended rules by the committees must be approved by the board of directors and then submitted to the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, for approval. So today we are going to hear from the United States Anti-Doping Agency, or USADA, about their role in all of this, as they will be overseeing the anti-doping, medication control, results, and testing for all of this within HISA, within the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. So with that, I'm going to introduce you guys to today's speakers. And I also want to say right off the bat, please do send your questions and comments. Remember that if you're watching this stream live right now, and you comment on this stream, I will see your questions and comments that pop up, and I can bring those onto the screen as we go along, and we will do our very best to answer them. If I don't have an answer now, I will get you an answer later. You all know how to get a hold of me. So first off, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Jennifer Royer. She is the Senior Director of True Sport and Awareness. Dr. Royer is the Senior Director of True Sport Education and Awareness for the United States Anti-Doping Agency. A former public school teacher, coach, and college instructor and administrator, she has nearly 2 decades of educational experience and is passionate about youth sports leadership development. She received a PhD in history from Texas Christian University, an MA in history from F. Austin State University, and a bachelor's degree in education from Texas A&M University. She currently holds State Board of Education certifications from both Texas and Colorado. Dedication to the success of young athletes is a family affair for the Royer household. Her husband, a 2-time Colorado Springs High School Football Coach of the Year, has spent a career in education and coaching at the high school level and returns this year for a 2nd season of coaching football at the United States Air Force Academy Prep School. As the mother of 2 young boys involved in competitive sport, she understands fully the importance of youth sport and activities, communities, in establishing the foundations for healthy childhood and adolescent experiences. So we're so excited to have her on, and she has quite the bio and a lot of experience that she brings to the table. And then second, we have Adam Woolard, who is the Director of Communications for USADA. He is the senior leader in charge of media relations, planning and execution, crisis communications, video and social media content strategy, and athlete communications. So we certainly have 2 very illustrious individuals with us tonight. I'm so thankful to welcome Dr. Royer and Adam Woolard. Welcome, you guys, to the Amplified Horse Racing Hangouts.
Thanks, Anise.
Thanks so much for having us.
Awesome.
It may be a first for your hangout. You may have 2 guests that are brawling in the background. Adam, you were supposed to cut half that mess out.
Nope. You got the full bio, and I just sent my resume over. Yeah.
Well, welcome. Y'all all know about my children now. Let's talk about the important stuff.
Hey, yeah. No, we usually really like to get into the backgrounds of all of our speakers that we have on. A lot of times I would make you guys talk about, your journey into the thoroughbred industry, but you guys have had a little bit different journeys into different careers that are, now still connected to the thoroughbred industry, which is something I like to really emphasize to our viewers out there watching, that there's so many ways of working in the horse racing industry, even if it's on the periphery and you don't, if you're not a jockey, trainer, vet, you can still be working in the thoroughbred industry, which is what we're going to dive into for you guys tonight. So I think a good place to start would be for both of you to explain what is the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, and talk to me a bit about both of your day-to-day work with USADA and what that looks like.
Jen, I'm happy to take this one.
Yeah.
So USADA is the independent agency in charge of doing testing, among other things, which I'll get into for a minute, for Olympic, Paralympic sport. And we also do testing for the UFC, and similar to horse racing, that involves in competition and out of competition testing. So in competition means the hours and days leading up to an event, and out of competition means no notice strategic testing outside of those competition periods. So certainly if you've seen USADA in the news lately, you've seen a little bit about those different testing periods. But yeah, USADA is is turning 21 soon. So we celebrated our 20th anniversary, and looking back at the history of USADA, I think most people are probably familiar with the Lance Armstrong case, but there are certainly a lot of other significant accomplishments over the years. And I think the biggest thing is establishing a uniform set of rules around anti-doping and ongoing research and scientific development to stay ahead of those who are intentionally cheating, but then also protecting athletes who may take a contaminated substance unintentionally, and working through that. And then we are a signatory to the World Anti-Doping Agency. So a big part of our job is working with them and sometimes challenging the World Anti-Doping Association and their rules to make sure that all of our athletes in the US, but of course around the globe, are treated fairly. So when our athletes who are headed to Tokyo, our US athletes who are headed to Tokyo here later this week, arrive in Tokyo, they can have peace of mind that they will be competing on a level playing field and against athletes who are subject to the same rules. So one misconception, just to get out of the way, I think a lot of people think that all we do is collect blood and urine, and certainly our duties expand beyond that. So in addition to that sample collection, we handle education, which is a huge thing that Dr. Royer is in charge of, and she'll speak to a little bit more. It's a huge part of what we do in forming our relationships with athletes, coaches, and other stakeholders. And then in terms of the testing, we also handle the results management. So positive test comes back, or we get a anonymous tip. What does that look like in terms of the investigation and adjudication process, so that even if an athlete is doping, we make sure that they receive the appropriate sanction that is fair under the rules.
Adam, that was a great overview, and I think clarified a lot, not just for me, but for our public out there. Can you talk specifically, I know you've given us a bit of an overview there about the other sports that you work with, but how that looks, maybe you could give us a couple examples of other sports and your relationship with them in terms of testing, maybe just a specific example.
Yeah, so I could give you, I think the specific example I would use outside of our Olympic sport, we work with the Ultimate Fighting Championship and have now since 2015. And that is an interesting program because even though we have jurisdiction in the US, because the UFC is not a signatory to the WADA code, or in other words, they are not beholden to the World Anti-Doping Agency rules, we have a bit more flexibility in terms of how testing has looked. I would still say, according to our statistics, that UFC fighters are the most tested in the world. And UFC is really an interesting program because we have 60 doping control officers domestically who test in different geographical areas around the country. But because UFC, although US based, is a global league, we work with other anti-doping organizations to do collections on a global basis, and then work with accredited laboratories across the world to handle those results management process. So that, I think that was a UFC was a relationship we entered knowing the scope. It was a huge responsibility that we were happy to have, and that relationship has developed over the years. We certainly, as anyone who reads about us may know, there is certainly a lot of questions about the business that we conduct and how we do it. But UFC is a perfect example of using education and a fair process to build trust with the athletes and the managers of a league over time in order to produce a successful program.
I think it's great. I always try to, a lot of our speakers will give analogies or give comparisons to what horse racing looks like to other sports, because I'm sure, you guys have had a learning curve as you've become involved with all of this with HISA. And so it certainly is a very niche industry when it comes to horse racing, and whatever comparisons we can draw, or, just talking about how this comes in line with other sports is always a good thing. So moving on to the horse racing side of things, can you explain USADA's involvement with the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act and what that will look like on your guys' end when this comes into place? And even now, as we're kind of phasing into this, because it will be fully enacted July 1st of 2022. So what does that look like for you guys right now? And then when HISA is actually a thing, yes.
Right. So I think just to rewind a little bit, by the way, you did a great job of your synopsis of the act. So this was an act that really first started to come to fruition when our CEO, Travis Tigert, attended a jockey club meeting in 2012. And he noticed there were a lot of things in the horse racing industry that he had seen in the Olympic world before USADA took over. And that was that kind of organically, these different authorities in different states had come together in kind of a patchwork fashion, which, as your audience knows, has been kind of the way horse racing has been regulated. And as we've talked about already, creating a uniform set of rules and protocols is a really important part of having an effective anti-doping program for the health and safety of all the athletes, in this case, equine athletes. So the act was first introduced or started to get support in 2015. The act changed names many times along the way, with support from Mitch McConnell and others last year. It finally was pushed across the finish line as part of a larger omnibus package in December. So right now, our organization is really working through establishing protocols, prohibited lists, the USADA policies, and then contract and budget that go along with executing those things. I would put an asterisk by the date you gave. If on track, yes, hopefully a year from now, we'll have moved into in-competition testing and started to pilot out-of-competition testing as well. But that, of course, we want to make sure more than anything that we get it right and we get buy-in from all the stakeholders. And after this, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Royer because I have talked way too much.
Well, you're doing such a good job, Adam. There's no point for me to jump in other than to support your statement that there is a giant asterisk in front of a lot of these conversations. The whole process is still so nascent in its form and so early on that to say any of these pieces are fully in place would be disingenuous. And I really think we want to be transparent about the fact that we want to build a program that is gold standard. That is the way we've approached every program that we engage. Everything from the education piece, which is my particular area of responsibility, through the other pieces that Adam has mentioned. And I think that's an important part of the conversation. It's not just the testing and results management. It is the accompanying concentric circles of support for this system that become really important to deliver the kind of trust in the industry and the kind of quality of assurance that there is a fair process, there's harmonized rule structure. And that includes everything from education. It also includes lab standards. It includes the testing and results management, includes education, the scientific research that goes on to support that. It is our intention to continue doing the work that we do every day in a new industry, but to continue to have those really high standards where anything less than gold standard is not acceptable. And so that for us is the point at which we can jump on board and get super excited about, is when we can guarantee that we can put our stamp of approval on it and know that we're doing great work for the industry and for the protection and welfare of not only jockeys, but those equine athletes. And anybody who has any connection to that industry knows that there's an awful lot of love for those animals and for the history and heritage of that sport. You had mentioned earlier that you usually have folks, outline their connection to the sport. I will say, and HISA, you and I have discussed this, growing up just miles from Churchill Downs, split in time between Bowling Green and Louisville, Kentucky, and then grandfather had a riding academy that sourced off-track horses and rehabbed for some of his horse, and some of the training horses that they used. This is something that hits home for a lot of USADA employees, just really a love for the integrity of sport and for these athletes in particular, and making sure that we're doing right by them is going to be forefront at every turn, I would say.
And I want to remind everyone watching out there, as you guys are listening to this, if you feel like, wow, this is all kind of confusing, this is very broad, this is all going to have, this is going to be a learning curve for me to be able to understand this, I want all of you to know that that's kind of the case for all of us, both in the industry, for those of you out there watching who are new to the thoroughbred industry, trying to wrap your minds around all of that. And that is totally okay. It was a learning curve for me researching to bring you this show today. I want to say quickly, anyone out there who wants to research more information can go to hisaus.org, HISAUS.org, and you can get more of a long form overview of how this all kind of came together. But Jennifer, I want to go back to you, Dr. Royer, about the education piece and how you guys will really work on educating people, both the general public and then people internally already working in the thoroughbred industry, about how this will look.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Anissa. It's certainly one that is occupying an awful lot of our time in terms of thought process and planning. We're all in a bit of a holding pattern until we get some of those key documents in place and get the contract in place. But ensuring that we are going to approach education from the same lens of commitment to best practice in the field, making sure that everything we do is evidence informed, that we're using smart metrics to ensure that we're making good decisions in the moment. We can pivot where we need to. All of those sort of general overarching educational principles will continue to be a part of that approach. But I would say, just in very broad terms, we're going to start by making sure that we've got the best folks in-house. We're going to make sure we are up to speed on everything we need to be. We're doing that by bringing in some really impressive experts. I know Adam was going to introduce Dr. Tessa Moore, and we didn't quite get to that, but we'll come back to it. But we're already making sure that we're sourcing incredibly bright, driven, committed individuals who have that industry knowledge that we will have to fill in some gaps around us, our processes organizationally. So that's a big one. I think the other piece is that we have a staff that's really committed to getting things done. We know we can't get it perfect, but we certainly strive for it. And so we've got a really high level of commitment to ensuring that we're taking care of the constituents within the industry in a way that is fair and just, and that ensures harmonization and uniform practice. So that's number one, is to start internally. And then I would say we would move into our actual education processes, and I'll get through education processes here, and then I'll flip it back over to Adam, who may want to talk a little bit about how we'll use external media to address those sort of outside of the industry educational roles. But some of the similarities that exist right now between the way that we educate in the human sport arena will transfer, right? As it stands right now, we approach education to ensure that we are reaching the folks that need to know the information in a way that they can compete safely and on a level playing field. And so we're educating in person, we're doing it online. We would do it with smoke signals if we thought it would work. We are educating pretty much every medium and modality you can imagine. We've got virtual engagements, online tutorials, print materials. I mean, you name it, we've got it. Social media campaigns and series, print resources. We've got digital resources. We have things that allow folks to look up medications online, check the status of their whereabouts, all the sort of nitty gritty pieces of the business of anti-doping. We have really tried to ensure that we over-educate about. I don't anticipate that would change for any reason. We look at our constituent groups now. Right now, we're educating multiple people for each athlete that needs this information. I think that's one of the similarities we can expect to see transfer across the industry. Obviously, the people will be different, but we've got an equine athlete at the center of this sort of concentric wheel, and then we're talking about jockeys, breeders, regulatory vets, you name it. Anybody who's surrounding that sort of human connection circle for an equine athlete, we're going to be making sure that we're meeting the needs of them, their educational understanding. We do that right now with our human athletes. We're not just educating the athlete. We're talking to coaches, trainers, team doctors, our national governing bodies, their staff, the USOPC staff. We're trying to make sure that we're surrounding folks with great information so that there's no reason someone would accidentally find themselves in violation. And that's a big, big benchmark for us as educators. We have, I think in 2020, our actual touch points were upwards of almost 60,000 touch points in the course of the year, some of that virtual, some of it in person, a little over 100 in-person visits. So the scope of educational experience, I would imagine, will mirror that. But the audiences, the end constituents, of course, will be different.
I have to say, I was scrolling USADA's Twitter, I think it was last week or just a couple days ago, and I saw a video. I think it was in terms of basketball, where you were going around asking youth about, what is doping?
Yep.
And I found it very, very impactful. And I would encourage everyone to go follow you guys on social media and look at some of the stuff that you're already doing, because I found that a lot of the videos were very memorable and had just a very unique, very clear-cut way of how you're doing a lot of this education that really sticks with people. Adam, did you have some other follow-up things about how you're going to be using media in education?
Yeah, I think my role here is to create videos, or to help create videos like the ones you saw. That is our Show Them Clean Sport campaign, which kind of acknowledges just how complex the world of anti-doping is. Both Dr. Royer and I have been with the organization for about the same amount of time, almost 3 years. I feel like I'm just starting now to get it and understand the big picture, just as we move into horse racing. So it's a constant learning process for us. I think one of the big things or benefits for us is establishing relationships with media in the horse racing space early on, because those will be folks who will help to inform how we communicate externally. Again, to bring up UFC as an example, it's as media is beginning to morph from major daily publications to more independent practitioners who are finding their way up to large exposure. What our job is, as much as we can, we want to be allies and have good professional working relationships with those media. I, as a UFC fan, coming into it, had high hopes and still have some great and have really good relationships within the UFC and MMA world. But what I realized was more important than having good relationships was making sure that what those reporters are reporting is accurate. And that goes back to the complexity of our business. I don't think that too many reporters have been out there purposely misleading their audiences.
Right.
But when you're a MMA reporter and you've got 7 fighter interviews, you've got a press conference to go to, and a variety of podcasts and other things to do, looking into the specific anti-doping rules may not fall first on your list. So what I have determined is my duty, and what I think will happen in horse racing is twofold: listening to what their understanding is of anti-doping, what their trust of the system is, and then how we plan to, over time, and it is a huge responsibility, how we hope to harmonize the rules, help to change the culture of racing, but then also disseminate the right information. I think we have seen it a lot, and I do not mean this politically at all, but when you talk about the pandemic and all the misinformation and good information that's been spread about the pandemic and the media's job trying to do that, it is drinking from the fire hose in terms of trying to keep up with the most up-to-date information. And often there's pressure on journalists not to be accurate, but to be first. So I find in our business that there's the same challenge to combat misinformation about a athlete's tests or details around a particular case. And we say to the horse racing community that we will spend the time, whether that means disseminating information through large media outlets to make sure that people understand what our role within the community is. But also we're happy to pick up the phone and have one-on-one conversations. If you call our office and you have a question, someone will email you or pick up the phone and call you back. We are a small 60-person organization in Colorado Springs. So you might have to give us a few days, but we will call you back and we will answer your question. I think so really that combination of large media communication, using our social media to disseminate information, but then also the grassroots one-to-one conversation is kind of our approach from the communications department standpoint.
And Isa, if I can add on to that quickly, one point that Adam made that I think is important is that USADA is deeply committed to not just the regulation and the enforcement of rules, but also the support of healthy culture around sport. And you mentioned that, changing of culture, and that's an important part for us. In the bio that you shared, there's a lot of reference to youth sport. That's because of USADA's commitment to a program that's called True Sport, and that's a part of our education approach. We sort of look at education in the human side along a continuum, and we have really looked at ways to try and influence and positively change the culture of sport. And, I think culture change can't be a mandate. It has to be a movement. And that is something that we really believe that education and those kind of positive engagements can help shape. It would be our hope that we could find cool opportunities to do that with equine industry as well. And certainly in the thoroughbred industry, I know there are some terrific youth programs that go on, but really raising that next generation of thoroughbred sport followers and lovers and hopefully career enthusiasts to really approach the industry a little bit differently than generations before. And that's where our True Sport program here falls into that educational continuum, which is getting in front of young athletes, those that influence young athletes and those that influence the industry early and often, so that the conversation can shift. And so that risk-reward conversation, is it worth it to dope, is it not? We might be able to start to shift the focus there. And I think we would hope to have a similar positive interaction across the larger culture of horse racing as well over time.
And Adam, I found it really impactful what you said about welcoming people to actually give you a call and reach out and communicate and actually have that person-to-person touch point. I think that even that invitation in itself can help to make it that much more, accessible for people to develop their understanding about this. I think when rules like this are starting to come into place, it, like we've already discussed, it can feel very overwhelming to people. And so even I have to say, I found it so amazing how accessible you guys have been to me, reaching out with questions and us even lining up this conversation. So I'm very, very impressed. And I think that will, hopefully have an amazing impact on the industry as all of this moves forward. And I'm sure another big component to this for you guys is going to be recruitment and expanding your own team. So how does that look as you start looking for new staff members or employees or team members to go forth and be ambassadors of all of this for you?
Yeah, and Adam, I'm happy to jump on this one, and you can add in as you see fit. But again, giant asterisk in front of all of it. But at this early sort of beginning phase of evolution for what our structure will look like and what the growth of our teams will look like, I think we certainly anticipate we're not going to keep the current staff numbers and be able to pull this off. I mean, this is an enormous industry, large number of athletes, even larger circle of human connections that are supporting those athletes, not to mention the dollars behind this. Is an enormous industry, and we are not naive to the fact that this is a big bite that we're taking off, and we're not kind of cavalierly running into this. We're really aware of the fact that it's going to take adequate staffing resources. It's going to take adequate expansion and process and policy changes. Like, we've got a lot of work to do to get ready to enact this in a really meaningful and positive way. That said, yeah, the team's going to grow, and provided everything falls into place, and we are in fact the agency that will be working on the anti-doping and medication control side of this, I would say keep an eye on our website, because things are going to happen quickly when they happen. Knowing that we have a July 1st, 2022 launch date, once we get the all right go, it's going to be go time around here like crazy. I think we're all sort of in the starting blocks right now, just waiting and hoping nobody false starts. We're just waiting to go. I'll have to find another analogy now that we're talking horses, but yeah, so we're all loaded up and ready to roll, but we just got to wait for that starting gun. So for us, we are looking for internal structure right now. We'll have lots better information as that rolls out in the next few months, I would imagine. But I know that we will also be looking for interns and externs. That's a big part of how we onboard great folks, and particularly developing talent here at USADA. We have an ongoing externship program. And so we take folks who are still in college, those who are recent graduates, and we have routine application deadlines and processes on our website. And as that begins to evolve, I would say check back to that website and please, consider submitting an application. We've gotten some amazing talent in the door the past few years with that internship program. And it's really promising, this sort of like forward thinking, problem solving, energy and enthusiasm that comes out of those programs. And we'd love to welcome folks that are new graduates and have an interest in the thoroughbred industry to come be a part of our team when it's time to take that step.
We're all about talking about internships and ways to gain experience on this show. As you guys probably know, is what I've expressed in the past. We're about promoting and amplifying existing educational programs and amplifying ways that people can get involved and start actively working in the industry. So I'd love to hear on a personal level from your guys' perspective, for somebody out there who might be watching this and think, wow, safety and integrity, this is something that I really want to get involved with working with. What are some tangible ways that people could maybe start actively learning and growing their skill set right now, if this might be something that they would be interested in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've talked a little bit about this. I know you've addressed it in some of your earlier hangouts, but obviously having folks being willing to reach out to any track staff around, anybody that's in the industry, just that willingness to make that phone call. I think what we have found, and certainly what we do and model here at USADA, is if someone takes the time to reach out to us, we are going to respect that and respond, and do so in a way that we hope is edifying to them going forward. We routinely get questions from folks that may not ever be able to be an intern or an extern or be hired at USADA, but we've made some terrific connections and try to help connect them where we can, because we know that all of our industry gets better when we have great folks working in the industry. So we're happy to help with those kind of conversations. We did, Adam, I'd love for you to take a second and give us a little intro on Tessa, because she is a terrific resource, I would say, for someone who's coming into the industry. She's got a breadth of experience that's not just domestic to the U.S., but she is I mean, she's just amazing, and we're so excited to have her on the team. And she would be, I'm sure, certainly willing to answer questions for someone who's got questions about how to get into this regulatory portion of the industry.
Yeah, so Tessa Muir, she is a former anti-doping manager at the British Horse Racing Authority. She is an equine veterinarian, a veterinary officer with the British Army, and a regulatory veterinarian at Racing Victoria. So she has an incredible resume, but everyone starts somewhere. But she is an excellent resource. If you would like to hear more from her, I would start by looking up the Anti-Doping podcast, and you can find her episode, which appears to be episode 22. Give that a listen. And if you have any questions for Tessa, you can email me directly at awoullard@usada.org. And I'm happy to send those her way. We're always looking for talented folks. And I would say also an important lesson I've learned just in my career over the years is you don't necessarily end up where you think. So even don't necessarily look for a direct path. I started out wanting to get into sports broadcasting and ended up working in public relations for the Green Bay Packers for 7 seasons. And I think that experience really informed my decision 10 years later to join the United States Anti-Doping Agency, because I worked for a football team and a sports organization where they really believed in doing things the right way and with integrity, and they were still able to win. So even if you don't get your first choice, try to think about what your career path might look like in order to get to whatever that destination is. And be open to change, because you might find as you enter a particular industry that's really what you want to do, or your career might take you somewhere else. So I'm a big believer in mentorship. I'm also happy if you want a career in sports. I talk to people all the time about the do's and don'ts and maybes of working in sports, and I'm happy to talk to any of your viewers.
One final pitch for our interns and externships at some point, if folks are considering applying here. I think it's one of the biggest perks of an internship here at a place like USADA is that we have this mix of being a relatively small community. Adam mentioned we're around 60 in-office staff in Colorado Springs. And then, of course, with our doping control officers, those folks who are sample collection personnel out in the field right now, we're much larger. But it's still small enough that everybody pretty much knows everybody, and you can walk down the hall and really poke your head in anybody's office and ask whatever questions about their area of expertise that you can. But that said, it's an office that's filled with some of the brightest, most insightful minds that I have ever been around assembled in one place. And so there's a lot of intellectual curiosity. There's a lot of commitment to sport and integrity. There's a lot of good stuff going on. And because of the nature of what we do here, we've got an education team, we've got a communications group, we've got a science team, we've got a legal team, we've got basically our own little law firm, our own little science operation, our own little new business model. Like it's just a rich place to get some varied experience that regardless of where you land in a career path, there's a lot to learn in an organization like this that is both connected to the work that you're doing, but also ancillary in some really meaningful ways.
Awesome. Adam, that was great information about the podcast, and I will be sure to put that in the show notes on the recording on YouTube for anyone watching out there who might have missed pieces of this and wants to share it with someone or watch even more of it. It will be recorded and placed on YouTube for your viewing purposes. And also thank you so much for sharing your contact information. This has been totally awesome. I really appreciate both of you so much for coming on. Do you have any final message out there kind of to put a stamp on this and finish it off for our audiences?
Sure.
I was like, go Adam.
I would say that we
I
are.
threw that out there.
I would say that we are both humbled to be here and to be embarking upon our horse racing venture. We're always willing to listen. I think that the changes our organization has made on behalf of athletes and other stakeholders in sports has been consistent and ongoing over time. I can't emphasize enough how much we want to emphasize, or how much we want to hear from the folks who know more than we do, and be able to implement those best practices into not just our testing, but into our education, the way we do communications, content that you want to see on our social media channels. All of that is fair game, and we look forward to hearing from you.
I echo every word of that, and just wanted to say thank you, Anise, for giving us the opportunity to connect with your audience and your constituent group. It's a real honor to be a part of this conversation, and I think Adam nailed it when he said we're humbled and excited. I think you've got a team of folks on this side of the equation who are earnest and driven and excited, and we're really, really looking forward to diving in and partnering with the industry to do a great job in protecting the welfare of these athletes.
I think that was a great way to put a stamp on it, because it's almost a call to action in a way too, that, you know, the public and the racing industry is very much part of this, and you guys are welcoming them to be involved and to be in touch with you guys. So thank you both so much, Dr. Royer, Adam. I appreciate it very much. And, you know, you are always welcome on Amplify's platforms and to be part of our education messaging. So best of luck to you as all of this continues to form and take shape. I know it's all very fluid right now, but that's part of the excitement of it. So thank you again, and hopefully we'll all be in touch soon.
Thanks,
Thank
Anise.
you so much, Anise. Appreciate it.
Cool. Well, guys, that was awesome. I feel so honored to have had Dr. Royer and Adam Wohlert on from the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. I hope you all enjoyed that episode. You might have heard Adam mention mentorship. That just triggered a shameless plug in my brain. Amplify just launched our inaugural mentorship program, which we are so excited about. We are soon going to be announcing our first intake of mentees, which is just amazing and so thrilling and mind-blowing to me that we have been able to really live out our mission through Amplify. And that mission is to promote and amplify education and careers in the thoroughbred industry. We are really here to be a resource to all of you out there. So don't forget, you are always welcome to reach out to me at any time at info@amplifyhorseracing.org. Send me your questions. If you have any follow-up questions to this episode, I would be happy to answer those. Or if I don't have an answer, I will certainly look them up and find the right person to deliver you an answer. So I hope you guys have a wonderful night and see you on the next episode.